Right. Brilliant. Well, I'm going to kick off, and no doubt people will join us as we go along. So, hello, welcome to this month's Bloom webinar. I'm Alexander Stevenson, the founder of Bloom. For those of you who are new to Bloom, we find experienced freelancers for interim, part-time, and project work. We've worked with more than 100 charities, helping with charity finance, HR, marketing, leadership, coaching, and fundraising, and generally helping to relieve workload. And if you want to find out more, please visit the site or drop me an email, and I'd be happy to chat. A bit of housekeeping before we start. Obviously, one of the advantages of Zoom is that we don't need to point out emergency exits, but one of the disadvantages is that we need to ensure that everyone is muted, so please do stay muted as we go along. But equally, please do use the chat box to ask questions or make comments, or also share some of your own experiences as well, which is one of the good things that tends to come from these webinars. We'll do our best to deal with the comments as we go along, and with any luck, we'll have some time at the end to have a go at any outstanding ones. Final bit of housekeeping: we are recording this session, so please don't write anything in the comments box that you wouldn't feel comfortable sharing with a wider audience. So onto today's webinar. Sound the trumpets, roll the drums. We are about to unleash two reports we commissioned to help charities think about how they manage workload. The background is that managing workload has been the #1 challenge faced by small charities for the last 5 years, and probably going back longer than that before the FSI surveys were done. And it's also something we think that Bloom can help with. You'll hear shortly from Darcy Myers, who's been speaking to lots of chief execs about their tips for managing workload. But first of all, you're going to hear from Nicola Hardy. Nicola is a very experienced professional researcher who is also on Bloom, and we've in fact used her a lot ourselves to do research into things like the freelancer market. She also did a great report on virtual fundraising, which you can see on the site, and now workload. And we're always stunned by how much she manages to cover so quickly and so brilliantly. In this instance, we asked Nicola to review workload generally, and not just in charities, but to look at the national picture and see what advice others have and also what support might be available. The full report with all the detail will be available on the website soon after this webinar, but for now, Nicola's going to share with you a summary of her findings. And I'm going to share my screen so that she can do so. And Nicola, you and Darcy are both on mute, by the way, so you might need to.
I'm going to unmute.
Yes, please do. Please do.
Thank you.
Very poor presentation without that. Good.
Right. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Lovely to see so many of you here. So, as Alexander has said, what I'm going to look at is heavy workloads and how to understand and address the issue. And Alexander was slightly perturbed when I showed him this slide because he thought that was me sitting in the middle. And I said, no, it wasn't me, but I'm sure we can all empathise with that situation. Although obviously, hopefully nowadays we haven't got the reams of paper that this lady has behind her. Next slide, please, Alexander. Oh. Right, so what we're going to cover today, and really as Alexander said, I mean, the full report, I think, stretches to almost 30 pages. So this is really going to be a gallop through the major findings. So first of all, we're going to look at the context and how widespread workload-related stress is, the legal side of it, which is slightly more of a minefield, some tips and practical solutions on how to cope with workload stress. And here I'm sure that some of you already will be aware of some of the tips I'm going to suggest, but hopefully there's other things that you might not know about. And finally, we're going to look at other organisations in the UK that you can turn to for further help, specifically on workload stress issues. Next slide, please, Alexander.
Sorry. Okay.
So I think the important thing to say is that obviously workload stress is not just related to the charity and voluntary sector. this is an endemic issue that is spread across the public and private sector. And these are just 3 of the recent surveys that I came across. And I have to say, in the full report, which will be going up later, there's a lot more statistics and data and visuals on this. But the one I just wanted to expand on a bit is the first one, the ACAS one. And I mean, that's a massive figure. 60% of respondents said the most commonly cited cause of stress and anxiety is their workload. And what was interesting, when they went on to ask employees what would alleviate their stress, a third thought a reduced workload would help with feeling less stressed, followed by better flexible working opportunities cited by a quarter, and more clarity around what is required from me for my job role, cited by another quarter. So I think that shows that, you know, there's a lot of things that can be done quite easily, and that can obviously help employees feel less stressed at work about their workloads. The other interesting point from that survey is that less than half of employees said they would talk to their manager in the event of being stressed or anxious at work, and more than 1 in 5 would not talk to anyone at work. So this again indicates that it's a massive issue which generally employees are not feeling happy about raising at work. And obviously, I mean, leading on from that, we know that workload stress can wreak a lot of havoc in businesses, including absence due to sick days, productivity and revenue loss, a culture of absenteeism or presenteeism, decreased motivation, poor general health, decreased well-being, and exhaustion and burnout, and obviously possibly higher staff turnover. So it's obviously within everyone's interest to try and look at this and work out how things can be alleviated. Next slide, please, Alexander. So I'm sure, as most of you are aware, under UK law, employers do have a duty of care to protect the health, safety and welfare of all employees while at work. And in theory, an employer should be conducting risk assessments for work-related stress and taking actions to prevent staff from experiencing that at work. And obviously workload is a major cause of stress in the workplace. What I should point out, and again, some of you may be aware of this, that there is no one statute that specifically covers workplace stress. There are a number of laws that are relevant in this area, including the Health and Safety at Work Act, the Management of Health and Safety at Work regulations, and obviously the Working Time Hours Directive brought in from the EU. But much of the law governing stress in the workplace in the UK has evolved from case law rather than legislation. So what I would say is that if you have particular issues in this area, it really would be best to contact an HR specialist, or I'm sure Alexander would like me to say that obviously there may well be HR bloomers who can help with this. And I really can't stress much enough that because it's constantly evolving, it's something that you really do need to take specialist advice on. What is interesting, and again, you may be aware of these, but I feel that the Health and Safety Executive has not done enough in propagating this, is the management standards. And they are voluntary guidelines and standards that were drawn up in 2004 in conjunction with a number of industry and professional associations. And they cover 6 key areas of work design that, if not properly managed, are associated with poor health, lower productivity, and increased accident and sickness absence rates. The 2 I want to just draw on today, because they specifically relate more to the workload concerns, are the demands and control. And demand specifically includes issues such as workload, work patterns, and the work environment. And the standard in this area should be that employees indicate that they are able to cope with the demands of the jobs asked of them. And what should be happening is that the organisation provides employees with adequate and achievable demands in relation to the agreed hours of work. People's skills and abilities are matched to the job demands. Jobs are designed to be within the capabilities of those employees, and employees' concerns about their work environment are addressed. Obviously, control is how much say the person has in the way they do their work. And what again should be happening is, where possible, employees have control over their pace of work. Employees are encouraged to use their skills and initiative to do their work. They're encouraged to develop new skills. They have a say over when breaks can be taken, and employees are consulted over their work patterns. So we can see, I mean, obviously there's a lot to take on board there. And when I looked at the Health and Safety Executive Work website, and I don't know if any of you looked at this, I was stunned by the wealth of information that's on there. And literally there's a whole workbook that will talk you through how these should be implemented in a workplace. So there is a lot of information out there readily available, which can be used and one would hope, you know, fairly easily implemented in your workplace. So I would highly recommend having a look at these standards if you haven't already. Next slide, please, Alexander. So now we're going to look at some tips for managing heavy workloads. Obviously 5 is a very random number. Within the report itself, there are a lot more tips and solutions. We've just pulled out 5 here to have a discussion about. I hope that there's some of these that some of you are already using. So we'll just have a quick look at some of these. Obviously, acknowledging limits is a major element in terms of managing a workload. And obviously that thinking that working a bit longer or a bit harder will help to catch up is often an illusion. And one of the most important things here is obviously for employees and managers to try and take control of the situation. And one of the most important ways to do that is to start saying no to those who keep asking you to do other tasks, or at least to make sure that they have more realistic expectations of when those tasks can be achieved. The next one I want to talk about, and I think that some of Darcy's interviews, in fact, I came across the Franklin Covey method of prioritizing, pick and prioritize, but I think that some of Darcy's respondents also are using something called the Eisenhower matrix, which is a fairly similar method. And this again is a very simple thing to do, and perhaps, you know, could be done on a daily basis. So what you should be trying to do is involve marking each task as one of the following, which is A, B, C, or D. And A is obviously the most urgent and most important task. B is important but not urgent. C is urgent but not important. And D is neither urgent or important. And obviously the thing here, which is fairly, you know, obvious, but sometimes gets lost when you're being pressurized by people, is that you should be concentrating on the A tasks before you move on to the B's and C's. And in theory, you should be just leaving the D tasks. So that, you know, I think can be quite a powerful tool in terms of looking at tasks on a daily or weekly basis and really trying to work out what are the ones that you should be prioritizing. That probably kicks into the next tip, which obviously is dealing with deadlines. And deadlines, I think, are often the largest cause of stress in the workplace. And again, I mean, you know, to a certain extent, you have nothing to lose by asking the manager to consider extending the deadline. And if that's not possible, perhaps you can ask for more resources to help meet that deadline, or find out if the task can be altered to make the deadline more achievable. So I think, again, that goes back to acknowledging limits, you know, being aware of what you can do, what other people can do, and, you know, trying to talk to managers about it. The next one, and obviously this has become more important in recent years, is using some sort of workload management software. And I would imagine that there are probably some of you here today who are already using that. And again, that can be very powerful in terms of being able to look at tasks and prioritize on a daily basis. I won't go in, obviously you can get quite techie with this. And in the report, there is a lot more in terms of how that can be used in terms of prioritizing tasks, matching staff with the right tasks, being able to coordinate on a daily basis and report back on a daily basis. I'm not a techie person myself, but in the report I have added in some recommendations in terms of, you know, the best workload management software tools for 2021. So there are some links to follow to get some ideas, you know, of what other people are using and what could be implemented in your organization, perhaps to, you know, start to try and streamline things. And particularly in these days where obviously more people are working from home or remotely, and that type of software can be more productive in terms of actually, you know, communicating with employees who are working remotely. So again, I would recommend, you know, having a look at that. Obviously, if you've got no one in-house who's able to, you know, do that type of thing, again, one of the tips that often comes out is looking at outsourcing, you know, areas of capability you don't have in-house. So, you know, again, look at that if you haven't got that expertise in-house. And the final one, which again, I'm sure no one's going to disagree with, is support systems are crucial. And that, interestingly enough, goes back to one of the HSE management standards, which, you know, is support. And the standard there is that employees are receiving adequate and information support from their colleagues and superiors. And again, what should be happening within any particular organisation is that there are systems in place to enable and encourage managers to support their staff, encourage employees to support their colleagues, and more importantly, employees know what support is available and how and when to access it, and employees know how to access the required resources to do their job. And the final one here, which, you know, is critical, and I'm sure you're all aware of this, is employees receive regular and constructive feedback, you know, and that can make a ton of difference in terms of people are stressed with a heavy workload, that, you know, taking that 5 minutes to say, oh, you know, that was a fantastic job, etc., etc., that can make a real difference in terms of people's, you know, motivation and encouragement to be carrying on. Next slide, please, Alexander. So these are some organisations that can help with workplace stress and heavy workload issues, and I'm sure that some of you already know some of these organisations. A lot of them, you know, are big organisations doing a lot of work in the UK. So I'll just briefly pull out some of the ones that perhaps are more useful. Business in the Community offers Public Health England health and wellbeing toolkits. The Chartered Institute of Personnel Development has an amazing fact sheet on work-related stress in terms of signs of stress, dealing with stress, and useful contacts. The Health and Safety Executive we've touched on, but they have a wealth of resources. They have a Tackling Stress workbook. They have a talking toolkit, which is helpful for line managers to have practical conversations with their employees. And they have a stress online community you can sign up to, where basically you can share tips and talk to other people about workplace related stress. The International Stress Management Association is a professional body for workplace stress management, and they have a UK hub where there's a forum where, again, you can share information on stress management, mental health, and workplace performance. The Stress Management Society, again, a non-profit organisation helping companies to recognise and reduce stress. And they, for example, offer corporate stress tests, business stress risk review, and a free business stress consultation. And the final one I just want to draw your attention to, and I wasn't aware of this, and I think it's a really important initiative that, you know, more should be made of. Every year on the 28th of February, and it's been running for about 15 years, they run something called Work Your Proper Hours Day. And that, I think, is a great way to end this part of the presentation, because that is something that every workplace should be aspiring to, and it's something we should all be getting involved with. So that's the end of my part of the presentation. I hope you found that useful and can take away some useful tips today. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Many thanks, Nicola, and that was an incredibly efficient canter through an extraordinarily rich report with lots in it, and obviously we'll be sending a link out to it after this. Yeah, there are loads of parallels to the work that Darcy has done. A quick introduction. Darcy, our next speaker, has been a chief executive for 13 charities, which feels like it must be some sort of a record. 3 of them as an interim, including one at the moment where you're currently chief executive staff of a charity of more than 1,000 staff. So it's particularly good that you've taken time to talk with us today. And we're obviously delighted to be able to call on your experience and knowledge as a bloomer, as well as helping with this particular report. For it, he's been talking to a dozen chief executives from charities of various sizes and shapes to find out how they handle workload, and has produced a terrific report, which, like Nicola's, will go up on the website shortly after the webinar. For now, Darcy is here to answer my questions and indeed yours and share the key points from the report. So, I mean, to kick things off, Darcy, you spoke to all these chief execs about how they manage workload. What, if anything, surprised you about what they said?
Well, just so I don't look like I'm completely flaky, I'll just say that I've been interim CEO for 10 charities and a permanent for 3. So
oh, sorry.
That's all right. Otherwise, it looks like I should jump ship every time it got difficult.
Yeah, okay, that does make more sense.
far from it. So what struck me, I think what really struck me was the diversity of the people I was talking to. So some really small charities with possibly no staff other than the chief executive and the board, right up to 1,000 staff. So really big range, but the issues were the same. It didn't really matter on the size of the organisation or the complexity of the organisation. The issues that the chief execs faced dealing with their workload was the same.
And I mean, 2 questions. What were the key issues that struck you? And also, does it feel as if things are dramatically different as a result of COVID, or is it just an enhanced version of what stress is generally?
I think that the fundamental issue was about, as Nikki was just talking about, was about that prioritisation of what's important, urgent, and not so pressing, and how you handle that. Whether you are in the position of having a big team around you and able to delegate some out, or indeed just be, and I think it was one of them who said, just being comfortable about saying no to something or not doing it. And that rationalization was really important. As far as the COVID crisis and the changes in how we've been working over the last year, with a massive increase in the remoteness of how we work, that has put an awful lot of pressure on not just CEOs and leaders, but staff generally, and well, not to speak people in their private lives as well. But if you are trying to run the organization and also having to spend much more time managing the well-being of your team because they are remote and less connected, that is a big stress factor for chief executives, and lots of them reflected on that. And how do I not only look after my own well-being, but how do I ensure that my team are being cared for as well when I don't have the opportunity to meet them in the corridor or have those informal conversations that we would normally have, which also leads into how are we ensuring the information flow is effective when you don't have, well, the Americans would call it the water cooler moments, those conversations. So the putting in systems in place, and Nicola was referring to that as well, that ensure you keep that flow of conversation going. So I use Slack, but then there's Teams. There are lots of different systems there that encourage you to stay chatty with each other.
Yeah, I want to come. You talked about that quote of somebody saying, being comfortable saying no. It was one of the things I picked out from the report. It's from Nicholas Sharp, and the quote is, "For me, there's an element of feeling comfortable in not always getting everything I want done." That's quite an impressive Zen state to get into. How do you get there?
Well, I mean, using things like the Franklin Covey matrix and the other ones, though, it's not about giving yourself permission. Well, I suppose it is giving yourself permission to not work on something, because we're all, if you're a chief executive, you're pretty driven, and you relish the role you are doing, and I would hope most people relish the jobs they do, and are lucky enough to be in that position. But then there's a lot of pressure on you you put it on yourself to feel that you have to do everything, and not, I don't mean take a responsibility to deliver everything, but you're there to guide and support everybody. You want to make sure everything's done on time. So the danger is that you then don't take that time to to do the matrix, to put things into that priority order, and then stick to it. I mean, I do them all the time and then ignore them. So you know, it's the discipline of doing it as much as doing it. So having time in your diary, I years ago I started a thing called my default diary, and once I had electronic diaries where you could have multiple diaries, and I actually mapped my week, and in that I had periods of reflection, periods of reading, you know, getting out and having a walk, talking to my network, you know, spending some time on social media, all of those things. But I actually blocked in little bits of time throughout the week, and then it sat behind my normal diary. So if I got to the point of, you know, 2:30 on a Tuesday afternoon and I'd finished a piece of work, I would look at my default diary and say, oh, look, in this period, I can do some reading around the topic, you know, read a journal or something like that. So I gave myself permission to spend half an hour reading the charity journal, whatever it was. And it just got me into a habit. I don't have it anymore, but that default diary, but it gave me the habit of doing those things that help me stay connected with my network, stay connected with what's what's going on, how things are changing, and also connected with myself.
And turning the fire onto you, when have you felt most overstretched in your career? When have you not been able to get to your default diary, and how did you cope?
I think the time that I was really, really overstretched was when I didn't do any of those things, and I took on more and more work, because someone would come to me, they had a problem, I was keen to be involved in that, and got involved and just kept on adding more and more things on. And interesting enough, it didn't immediately become obvious that I had too much on my plate. So for quite a long time, and I'm talking back probably a few weeks, I was absolutely running on empty, but didn't recognize I was doing so. And it got to the point that I almost fell over. I mean, literally fell over, but I just felt I can't do anything. And I wanted to just give up everything. It was a sort of panic moment when I couldn't rationalize away what I shouldn't be doing, and almost wanted to just dump everything and start afresh. Luckily, I have I do have good support around me, and I was recognised, and I was encouraged to rationalise that and step back. But it was a dangerous moment, and if I had been less supported, less healthy, I may well have had serious medical problems.
And obviously, part of being a chief exec is knowing when you're overstretched and dealing with that, but it's also identifying it in the people who work for you and with whom you're connected. What were their thoughts, and indeed your thoughts, about identifying, spotting it in other people, and how do you support them when you do?
I think there's an added complication with the COVID situation and the remote working. So it's less easy, and then therefore, of course, needs more effort to recognise when your colleagues are overworked and stressed. But spending enough time to talk to people, listen to what they have to say, and observe as well. I mean. Nikki, I can't remember the date of. I jotted it down. The work your proper hours day. But that's the sort of thing. Are people working ridiculously long hours? Are you seeing indicators of that? So emails, coming out at midnight or 3 a.m. Those are indicators that people are working outside their proper hours because they are stressed by the work they have to do, and are not having a healthy out of work pattern as well. Now we all have different styles. I'm an early bird, and I like to get up early. So me getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning is my norm. and then I ping off loads of emails, and you can, as the chief executive, you've got to be jolly careful that what you're not doing is sending a message to everyone else is that I expect you to work at 5 o'clock in the morning, and why haven't you responded to my email? I'm sitting here, waiting for you to respond. So some of the tips there were, having a email delay system so that you can do your emails at 5 o'clock in the morning, but they won't actually go until later on in that day. And one of the chief execs I spoke to said, and she times it so they go at around 10 o'clock. So they're not sitting in someone's inbox when they turn on their computer in the morning. Gives them time to get going, and then they get the flows of emails. Hopefully not in one massive bunch. So it's the way you behave will affect the way your team behaves as well. So if you're working silly hours, then they will think that that's what is expected. And even if you tell them not to, they behave the way you behave. So that's one of the things I have adopted is an email delay system, which is fascinating.
Yeah, that's right. I think one of the great things about the report is those sort of apparently almost small-scale tips, which actually make a huge difference. I was also very struck by one of the chief execs who says they try and look 2 weeks ahead in their diary, because it's much less insulting to cancel a meeting 2 weeks ahead than it is to cancel it a week ahead, which I thought was again a nice tip. I'm also interested, what's your advice to someone who is not the chief exec and also doesn't have a very supportive or good chief exec, but is suffering from too much work? How can they deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds very simple, but the answer is, get a network behind you. And I think that one of the most powerful parts of that is having a mentor or a coach, somebody who is, you can share your thoughts and ideas with, and they can guide and encourage you, and challenge you as well. So if you're in the situation where you haven't got a very supportive CEO, and that is your direct line management, having a mentor where you can then talk through, how do I do this? How do I approach it in a way that will land better with my boss, is really helpful. So I think having the as a mentor myself, it's often just being a mirror, and allowing people the time to look in the mirror, and go, oh, okay, this is what the reality is. This is what it looks like. And you probably have the solution inside you. It's just helping you bring that out.
And how, because those networks, that came up as a thing in the report a lot. And if you don't have that network at the moment, how do you set about finding it?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment it's a bit difficult, but as we come out of COVID, and we can re-engage with the world, it's getting out there and doing it. So the very first CEO role I had, which I became a CEO by accident, I didn't think I was ready to be a CEO. I never even thought that I would become one. But I saw the job role. I was really interested in understanding what it was to be a CEO. So I went through the application process. And when the board in the interview said, the jewel in their fundraising crown was a collection box scheme around pubs and clubs in Britain, and it raised £100,000, which was a quarter of their income, I said, that's wonderful. It's a shame it costs £80,000 to administer. And the board said, does it? And after I panicked that I misread the accounts, I thought, I can help. I can bring some business rigor to this charity so that the gifted money is spent where it's meant to be spent. So I suddenly found myself being a chief executive, and I didn't have that network around me. So I actually went to the local business network was going on, which was made up of local solicitors, accountants, caterers, everything, carpenters, all sorts of things. And it was a weekly thing, very bad for my health because it was a weekly breakfast. So I ended up by eating the cooked breakfast. But you had to, every week you had to say what your business was and what you were looking to achieve and what support you were looking for. And just by sharing that with another group who were safe, you could completely muck up your presentation and nobody was going to mind. You might get ribbed a bit, but you began to develop your elevator pitch, if you like, and also your confidence in sharing your concerns with other people. And then from that, I found other networks that were more specific to what I was doing.
That's very helpful. And on, by the way, I'm going to hog Darcy until 10:45 unless others have questions. But please do pile in if you want to. But and on sort of coaches and mentors, I mean, I've talked to lots of people who say, yes, I love the idea in principle, but actually finding the right person and the right chemistry and making sure it is properly useful is, I don't have the time, it's too much hassle to do, and there's no guarantee of success. How do you go about finding the right person? Yeah,
I mean, it is important. The chemistry between the two is vital. And well, we're sitting in the right place to have this conversation, really, Alexander, because it is using something like Bloom to help you identify the right personalities as well. So you might meet 3 potential mentors before you pick the right one for yourself. So there has to be that the chemistry between the two, but also the understanding of what is expected from me as the mentee, and what I can expect for the mentor as well. So having that frank conversation. So how long is that going to take? So you're going to speak to 3 people. You're probably talking no more than an hour and a half in total. And the investment of that hour and a half to find a mentor that's going to help you grow and develop and be more effective, well, that's a pretty good return on the investment.
Yeah, great. And you talked about you'd taken that email delaying tip into your own life from your discussions with the other CEOs. Are there any other particularly useful things that you may already do you thought came out particularly strongly? For example, for me, it just seems reading as if most charity chief execs spend all their time going for walks. So that was a big takeaway for me from it. And yes, I don't know what else particularly struck you.
Yeah, I mean, going for a walk is great. It's good for you. And if you're lucky enough to be able to take your dog to work, it's good for the dog as well. But over the years, I've had the walking, talking meetings with lots of organisations. Was one organisation which was a health organisation, and I noticed that the staff arrived in the morning and sat in there. We only had one big room for the whole organisation, sat in that room all day, and then staggered out and got in their cars and drove home at the end of the day, having eaten their lunch at the tables, and they were sort of, starved of oxygen and bug-eyed, and they were just exhausted by the end of each day. So I started saying, oh, it's nice and sunny outside. Why don't we just walk down to the duck pond, which wasn't really a duck pond, but it was more like a rubbish collection. But no, let's go for a 5-minute walk, and you can talk to me about that, whatever the topic was. And then we started having lunchtime walks. So we all came up with a route, and then we rotated the routes, and it got everyone out, got us talking, and it also broke down some of the barriers of talking to the chief exec or talking to finance. I don't talk to her because she deals with the money, or and I'm dealing with this. So going on a walk, that was a natural conversation starter. But yeah, so it's not spending all your time outside walking, but it is really important to spend time walking the job. That old phrase, and this big organisation that I'm working with at the moment with 1,100 staff, I'm spending most of my time out of my office. I'm walking around, talking to people, having meetings where they are rather than them coming to me, and I think that's really important.
Brilliant. Well, on that note, and with a view to the time, I'm going to wrap things up by saying, first and overwhelmingly foremost, a huge thank you to Nicola and Darcy for being here today and for providing such helpful perspectives, and of course thank you to everyone for attending and engaging so thoughtfully. There's some quite useful comments on the side, particularly around workload software, which are pretty positive as well. So it's worth having a look at those if you haven't already. As ever, if you've been affected by any of the issues raised in this webinar, then please get in touch, and we'd love to have a chance to help. I'll shortly send you an email with links to the video and the 2 reports, and obviously please don't be shy about sharing them around, and that's us done really. So thank you very much indeed for attending, and hopefully see you at the next one. Goodbye.
Just waiting for Joyce to leave us. Oh, I can't hear you, John Alexander.
That's better.
We lost Nikki, unfortunately, but
I'll give her a call afterwards. Yeah, as I do. Yeah. Well, thank you. I don't know how you thought that went from your.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty good. It would have been nice to, I suppose, to have a chance for the people to ask questions from the board, from the floor. There were a few nice comments in the chat room, which looked quite interesting. But yeah, no, hopefully that was a useful. And I really wanted to get the mentoring pitch in.
Yes, no, thank you. You did that very well. Not too crudely. So no, that was very. No, thank you so much. I obviously you're in the crosshairs at the moment, so I particularly appreciate that.
And, yeah, no, my pleasure.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. Yeah, we did. We probably. I didn't. Maybe I should have left a tumbleweed moment for people to ask questions. But
it's just timings, and it's just having enough time to do it all, and you know, managing that as well. But no, that's fine. That's fine. It doesn't matter at all. But yeah, no, I thought it was good. I thought Nikki's presentation and what she was saying was excellent. And I look forward to seeing those reports up, and then I will share them on my network as well.
Great stuff. Thank you very much indeed. And yeah, and I at some point, as I said, threatened, I want to have a proper sit down and hear how on earth you've approached your current job and how it's going, because it sounds.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure. Yes, once I've come back, I'm in Newcastle at the moment. So once I've come back from my walk and hopefully settled the organisation down a bit, we can go for a walk and have a conversation.
Yes, that'd be very good. Very good. Great stuff.
Take care.
Bye. All right. See ya.